Okay, today we're going to learn to multiply decimals, which you already really know how to multiply decimals. But what I want you to know is why you're doing what you're doing, because you memorized these steps a long time ago. So on your paper, on your notes, in the first slide, you've got this thing that talks about your grids, and you've got three, looks like little grids or graph paper, and each one of those grids is going to count as one unit. Okay, so that one unit, the first unit, is filled in yellow, and what I want you to see is that the whole unit represents one thing, one square, one big square. And then we've got these little bitty squares. There's 10 this way and 10 this way, so there's 100 altogether. So each little bitty square counts as 1/100th, and each strip of squares counts as 1/10th. So there's 10 strips altogether. There's only 7 of them colored, so 7 out of the 10 strips are colored, so that's 7/10ths. And what we're going to do is multiply that by 8/10ths. And now I have the 8/10ths going the other direction, still 10 of them in a row, so the strips are going this way for tenths now. And we're going to multiply those together. And when we multiply them together, the way we've always done before, is we want to actually see, when I multiply these together, how many 7 times 8 represents, but with tenths instead. So when you look at the overlap of the green, where you've got the yellow going this way and the blue going this way, this overlap will count as our actual answer. Okay? And when we multiplied before, we would always say, okay, well, if I have 8 rows and 7 columns, and if I want to count these columns up or rows up and see how many there are altogether, I would say 8 times 7 is 56. Well, now these are representing hundredths, so there are 56 hundredths shaded in. And before, there are 7 strips, okay, and 8 strips, and those represent the tenths. But once they overlap, you have to look at them in hundredths. Okay? So what we want you to get to understand here is that if I just took 7/10ths times 8/10ths, you learned a long time ago that you have to count up the decimal places behind the decimal point. And there are 2 of them, so your answer is going to have 2 decimal places. Well, I want you to see by this drawing, and I want you to actually shade in on your paper so that you can see where they overlap, and to see that this would be 56 hundredths, 2 decimal places. 1 decimal place here, 1 decimal place here. So now we look at the actual problem, and then you can pause the video if you want to do your shading right now with your yellow and blue makes green. So now we're going to look at 7 times 8 we know is 56. And then if we do 7/10ths times 8/10ths, that's, if we just look at the 7 times 8 and do the 56, then we count our decimal places. So we have 1 decimal place here, 1 decimal place here, and we have to count those up, and that's going to be 2 decimal places overall. So we're going to move our decimal point back 2 places, and that will be 0.56 or 56 hundredths. And so that gets the 6 in the hundredths place, because we have tenths times tenths is hundredths. 10 times 10 is 100, so tenths times tenths is 100ths. So we have to have it there. Okay, the next example we're going to do is we're going to multiply 7 times 1/10. This is pretty easy. We're just going to put 7 and then times 0.1. The zero's there just to show you where the decimal point's located. So when I take 7 times 1, of course I get 7. And there are 0 decimal places in this first numeral. The second numeral has 1 decimal place. So that's going to be 1 decimal place overall, because we're going to add up all the decimal places. So 1 times 7 is 7. We're going to go back 1 decimal place to figure out the decimal place of the answer. So 1 times tenths is tenths. That makes sense. Okay, the second one I'd like for you to do as a checking for understanding problem. So it's -3 times 3 hundredths this time. And I'd like for you to do this on your notes and pause the video. But notice that it's negative times positive. Now pause the video and then you can come back and check. Okay, on this one, we have -3 which has no decimal places, and then 3/10, my bad, which has 2 decimal places. So altogether our answer is going to have 2 decimal places, and we also know our answer is going to be negative because a negative times a positive is a negative. So when we set this up, the only reason this decimal place here is to show that that's in the hundredths place, but we can just line them up and do 3 times 3 is 9, and it's positive times negative, so my answer is negative. There are 0 decimal places here, 2 here, so that's 2 altogether. So we move our decimal point back 2 places to get our answer. We have to add a 0 there, so the 9 will be in the hundredths place. All right, next example. Again, I'd like you to do this one as a checking for understanding. So you can pause the video and then come back and check your answer. Okay, the second problem, we're taking 2.8 times 1.8. We have 1 decimal place in the 2 factors. So our product is going to have, of course, 2 decimal places. And when we multiply, we get 8 times 4 is 32. Carry the 3. 8 times 2 is 16, and we're going to add 16 and 3. That's where we get the 19 here. And then in the second row, that's a 9. I'm trying to do it like they do it. We have to, the 1 is in the ones place, so we have to put a 0 down here in the tens place and go 1 times 4 is 4. 1 times 2 is 2. We're going to add them all together, so that's 2. 9 plus 4 is 13. Carry the 1. 1 plus 1 is 2, plus 2 is 4. And we're going to have 2 decimal places in our answer. Let's put DP there. And so we're going to move our decimal point over 2 places. So our answer is going to be 4 and 32 hundredths. And then it also says to estimate, to check whether your answer makes sense. So when we do our estimation, 2.4, if I round that to the nearest 1, that's 2. If I estimate 1.8, round it to the nearest ones, that's going to be 2. And I'm multiplying these 2 together, so your answer should be about 4, and 4.32 is about 4. So it's very important that you check, especially when you're doing decimals, because if you get your decimal points in the wrong place and you would say, oh, that's supposed to be 43.2, when you check it real quick, and you could do the mental math before you ever work the problem and know it's got to be around 4. So if you got 43.2, you know you've done something wrong. All right, next example. Oh, that's just they're working it out there. I've already worked it out for you. Okay, the next one, let's try this checking for understanding as well. So pause the video and do negative 3.84 times 9/10. And notice you've got a negative times a positive. So go ahead and pause. Okay, so for this one we've got 3.84, which has, negative 3.84, which has 2 decimal places, 2 DP. And then we've got 9/10, which has 1 decimal place. So we know that our answer is going to have 3 decimal places. So now I'm going to multiply. 9 times 4 is 36, carry the 3. 9 times 8 is 72, plus that 3 is 75, carry the 7. 9 times 3 is 27, plus 7 is 34. And I've got 3 decimal places, so it should be 3 and 456 thousandths. If we estimate, it's going to be 3.84 is negative. Ooh, answer is negative. Negative times positive is negative. So that's going to be approximately negative, 4, because we're rounding to the nearest 1. And then times 0.9, that'd be about 1. And negative 4 times 1 is negative 4. And that's very close, so that will work. Alrighty, last one, we're going to look at a word problem. And on this one it says, to find your weight on another planet, multiply the relative gravitational pull of the planet and your weight. So we know we're finding your weight on another planet. So we're going to multiply relative gravitational pull and your weight. And the relative gravitational pull on Mars is 38 hundredths. And this person weighs 85 pounds. I was worried there thinking they were going to ask me to put my weight on there. I'm not going to do that. So we need to find your weight on the other planet. So we're going to take, we got to multiply them together. So we'll take 38 hundredths and 85 and multiply. So 5 times 8 is 40, so we carry the 4. 5 times 13, or 5 times 3 is 15, plus 4 is 19. And we just bring down the 1 because there's nothing else to multiply the 5 by. Now we got to bring down a 0 and go 8 times 8 is 64, carry the 6. 8 times 3 is 24, plus that 6 is 30. Then we're going to add them up. So it's going to be 0, 13, carry the 1, 2, 3. And we've got 2 decimal places here, no decimal places here. So we're going to have 2 decimal places in our answer. So we're going to go backwards 2. And so the answer is going to be 32 and 3/10 pounds is how much you will weigh on Mars. On Mars. Alrighty. And we could estimate that real quick and just say that's about, that's close to a 0.5, a half, and half of 85 pounds is about 40 something, so that's a little less than half, so that should be a little less. That's good. So that would be our final answer. Alrighty, so just if you want to go through any of this and make sure you've written all your notes, make sure you shaded your boxes in that first example. Make sure you have that ready to go for tomorrow and show all your work. If you have to look at the video again, that's fine. And we'll do the practice tomorrow. Thank you.